Hello, this is Daughter of Christ with another real-life transformation story. It's of a man from Iraq, which I've linked and translated here, and which the brother tells in his own voice. He says, I hope to encourage those who have crossed over to the truth with my testimony. Up until 1996, I was Muslim, but not very strict with my religion. I'm from Iraq, but had moved to another country. Back in Iraq, I used to fast during Ramadan, and I prayed, but not often. I learnt about Islam from school and from my family, most of whom were devout Muslims. In 1996, because of the encouragement of strict Muslim friends, I started getting closer to Islam and studying it more. They said, "You are grown up now, so you must start taking your religion more seriously." As my friends and I were discussing things, we concluded that because we were far away from Allah, and because of not strictly adhering to prayer and fasting, that Allah punished us and allowed our country to be at war with Iran and America and other conflicts as well. I also needed God's presence in my life, having left Iraq behind, as I was suffering psychologically. So I started praying and fasting more, and obeying rules more strictly. I started reading the Quran for 2 or 3 hours a day, and my Muslim friends were happy to see that. But I noticed that they did not have any knowledge of Islam. They only learnt a few verses to pray with, but knew nothing else. So I decided to return the favor to my friends by teaching them what I was learning from the Quran and the classical tafsir interpretations to show my gratitude for their advice. I started deep studies into Islam. I started to recount my past sins and to feel bad about them, and I tried to make up for them by feeding poor people. My reading made me stop to think many times. For example, in Surah 66 where it says, "O Prophet, why do you prohibit what Allah has made lawful for you?" This was the first shock. I was told there are 2 interpretations. I only knew the one where the prohibition was of honey, but then I found out the other was a prohibition of sexual contact with Maria the Copt. Side note, this is when Muhammad was caught by Hafsa with Maria in Hafsa's bed, and so made an oath to never sleep with her again, to appease Hafsa, but then Allah told him to break the oath and sleep with Maria as he wishes. For those of you who didn't know the story. But back to our brother, he says, the Sheikh told me that Maria was not even married to Muhammad, but she was his, quote, right-hand possessed slave, and that he used to have intercourse with her, and that she gave him his son Ibrahim. I could not find this acceptable despite the Sheikh's explanation. I asked God for forgiveness and said to myself, maybe the Sheikh was wrong. I looked into the verse that allows Muslims to have their right-hand possessed sex slaves. I was still committed to Muslim prayer and fasting at the time, but I discussed those verses with my friends, who said, look, you're not more honorable than Allah. Allah is the one who revealed those verses and allowed those things. Satan is making you think they're unacceptable. So I used to pray to God. I said to him, I cannot accept that allowing the right-hand possessed women is a divine ruling. I asked God to interfere in my life and protect me from Satan's influence. Then I came across Surah 24 verse 33 that says, do not compel your slave girls to prostitution if they desire chastity. Allah is meant to enforce chastity whether they desired it or not, so I found it unsuitable that Allah added the phrase, if they desire chastity. One of my friends went to ask a sheikh on my behalf. The sheikh told my friend to avoid me completely, not to talk to me or sit with me or even eat with me, and to throw my belongings out on the streets, if he could. That was the sheikh's answer. I was very saddened by this, not just for myself, but for my friends. All of us have psychological problems because of the war and life's hardships, but we're not even allowed to discuss things or ask or find things out. I bought 2 books. One was on the battles of Muhammad called Ghazawat an-Nabi, and the other was on the wives of Muhammad called Ummahat al-Mu'minin. I was shocked when I read the story of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, Muhammad's companion, who stood outside the tent of Muhammad to guard him on the night that he took Safiya following a battle. When Muhammad asked him why he was stood there, Abu Ayyub said to him, I know she was recently wed, and that you just killed her husband, her father and her brother, so I was afraid she may harm you. That day I was shocked by the story, and I threw up, the same way a man would feel who had trusted his wife all his life, only to then see her betray him with another. That's how I felt. I did not accept it. I found it impossible for Muhammad to have done such a horrible thing. I thought the book must be wrong, but I checked, and the story was true. My friend said, Kafirs deserve this, it's okay. but their defense of it was illogical and inhumane, and I decided that God cannot be behind their opinion. God started opening my eyes. I saw that us Muslims are normal people, like everybody else, but it's only when we talk about Islam or defend it that all kinds of evil come out of us. I saw that Islam is the cause of all evil, that allows people to kill, to take women, to invade, all with an Allahu Akbar. I thought, what is this Quran that I'm reading? I used to recite without paying attention, but now that I see verses about Muhammad's women that are nothing to do with me. Is this God's book for my life? The halo of holiness that I had around the Quran fell. Us Muslims see the Quran as holy and kiss the book when we handle it. I saw that the contents of the Quran do not deserve that holiness that we give it, and neither does Muhammad himself. His life is all this. The Prophet invaded, the Prophet married, then repeat. This battle, that muta, just depravity. I asked God if my Muslim prayer is what he accepts and wants. I started seeing the uselessness of repeating verses from the short surahs like, quote, when the victory of Allah has come and the conquest, unquote, in Surah An-Nasr. I didn't see that it benefited me. I expected a spiritual or moral change, but it didn't happen. All it did was fill the heart with bitterness against unbelievers and hatred for people. I found nothing to encourage humanity or love for others. We have nothing that involves our heart or conscience to judge things. All we have is, Allah said, and the Prophet said, and that's it. I said to God, it is enough. I'm not convinced that the Quran is your word. I feel your presence, but I'm not convinced by those words. Those words will lead me to be worse. I believe in you and I ask you into my life. I was not happy to do this. It was a sad shock to me that the Quran is false. Then by chance I heard a Muslim mocking a Christian, saying, your holy book, the Bible, is full of myths. This was the first time I heard about a holy Bible. I heard of the terms the Injil and the Torah, but never the Holy Bible. Back in Iraq, I had a library and I liked to read important books and literary works. I read on pagan religions like Zoroastrianism and others, so I felt it affects my pride that I'm ignorant of an important book like the Bible. I should read it so that if it's mentioned, I can say that I've read it. I asked a friend for the Bible. I thought it would be like a mythological book, like Homer's Odyssey. I believed there was not even a 1 in a billion chance of my ever believing in it. And when my friend advised me to read John's Gospel first, then to read the New Testament, but to read the Old Testament before Revelation to help me understand, I laughed to myself at my friend's efforts, thinking, he expects that I'll believe in it and believe in the Son of God and be Christian? They called the Quran great and it turned out to be nothing. The first time I had the Bible in my hands, I started reading John's Gospel, and I continued reading for 16 whole hours. The first thing that happened to me when I started reading was that it took me out of the depression that I was in. It touched my heart with all its details. It captivated me. It made me go through how my life was without it. When I read Jesus say, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, I remembered the Quran when it said, fight them, Allah will torment them by your hands. I saw it's impossible for the Bible and the Quran to be from the same God. I wondered how one could love an enemy. But then I read Jesus saying, if you love those who love you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. It made sense. I understood the reasoning. There's no real effort or virtue in loving those who love you. Anyone can do that. That was logical. When I read the Gospel, I felt like I was walking with Jesus, like one of his disciples, listening to him and witnessing what he did. It did not seem like I was reading. It felt like I was walking with him and hearing him. It affected me so much that in the following 2 or 3 days, people noticed something different about me. I wrote down a few questions from my friend. He told me to come to church, so I went and met with the minister. He said to me, I sense you have some knowledge of God, but I do not wish to try to convince you of Christianity. Why don't you attend with us here in church for a couple of weeks? See how we worship and listen to sermons, and the Lord may answer your questions, or else I will answer them. I spent the most wonderful 2 weeks attending church. I saw the love of God, and real worship with entire families together, not just the men, like in a lot of mosque worship. I heard them sing hymns to glorify God. I saw Christian teaching that challenges human nature to elevate it to such a level that they'd be like angels. The Lord touched my heart. The minister then asked me, what happened to you and what have you experienced? حقيقة بتمنى إنه ربي يحاسبني من يوم قرأت الكتاب المقدس. I told him that I wish God judges me only since the day I read the Bible. I do not want any other days in my life to count. I told him I want God to erase the pain from the hearts of anyone that I wronged in my life before I read that book. I want God to give me a brand new heart and make me forget everything I lived before I read his words. I want to rebuild my personality with the Bible. The minister told me, "You are more of a follower of Jesus than I am. You just expressed a prayer of repentance." But he led me in a traditional repentance prayer anyway, just to be reassured, and that is how I became a Christian. I want to tell Muslims that I have God in my life, which is a strange terminology for them, but in Islam, you just have works and duties like prayer and fasting. In Christianity, it's different. There's an experience of the love of God. If you do not sense God's presence, you are fooling yourself. If you do not see a change in your life, you are fooling yourself. I know that way of speaking is new to Muslims, but please reflect on it, beloved. And that is the end of the story. We thank Jesus for his work in the life of our brother from Iraq.